The medieval period or the Middle Ages is sometimes regarded by some as a backward period of history, in which the population lacked intelligence and ability to think for themselves or cleanliness. It's also believed to be a time of dirty towns, of unsanitary conditions and disease, such as when the Black Death ravaged England, causing much devastation and also causing a huge plummet in the population figures. We recently visited Wharram Percy, England's most famous deserted medieval village. What we found was a beautiful church, the remains of many different buildings and a settlement which declined due to changing patterns in the economy and farming, with the villagers making way for a flock of sheep for wool production. However, new archaeological evidence has plunged Wharram Percy into a darker light, telling a story of the beliefs in the living dead and the efforts that villagers would go to protect their lives from evil spirits and even corpses arising from the graves. Today we look at a bizarre medieval practice used to ward off the living dead. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. In 2017, a study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science Reports made extremely interesting reading. The findings inside the report was obtained by a team led by Simon Mays, a human skeletal biologist who analysed bones that had been excavated from Wharram Percy. Wharram Percy is a remarkable deserted medieval village, but also a site of huge archaeological importance, with excavations over the past few decades bringing us closer to understanding how medieval people or peasants lived. We know the people of Wharram Percy were farmers who worked the land, visited church regularly to hear about the teachings of the Catholic Church, and also obtained food from the mill pond. The church that remains in the village was at the centre of village life. Everyone attended weekly, paid 10% of their earnings to the church, and would go along with everything that the church would say. We know medieval religion to be dominated by the teachings of the Catholic Church that were fervently against anyone challenging their ideas or beliefs, to the point where people would be put to death for this and accused of heresy. The medieval church would teach people about how to get to heaven and how to avoid hell, and how to live a life free of sin. The congregation on the whole were mostly illiterate, so would rely on images depicting the savagery of hell, which would strike fear into their hearts. Now, during times of great pestilence or the plague, people would believe that this was purely sent by God to punish people on earth for their sins. Alongside religious beliefs, however, were folk beliefs that people would possess and then twin these with their religious ideas. In the medieval period, there was a folk belief that sometimes the corpses of the dead could awake and arise from their graves and roam around the local area spreading disease, causing chaos and violently assaulting those who would come across them. Restless corpses were believed to be caused by a lingering malevolent life force that had been living in individuals who had committed evil deeds and animosity when they were living. So basically the people believed in the living dead that could rise up and bring horror to local communities. The idea of the living dead ties in quite nicely to what we know about medieval religion and the teachings of the church. The church at the time would probably say that the living dead are those people who have sinned and who are destined for hell, or that these are the bodies of people waiting to be judged. This obviously would play into the church's hands, as they could offer indulgences, financial offerings to a priest or the church to guarantee a quick passage to heaven and to avoid coming back as a member of the living dead. If people paid their tithes too and lived a life free from sin, this could also be a way of preventing this happening. Medieval writers have outlined a number of ways of dealing with revenant ghosts, with one of these being to dig up the corpse of someone who had recently died and who may have sinned, to then decapitate the head from the body, and then furthermore dismember the body before burning parts of it on a fire. Archaeological excavations at Wharram Percy, the deserted medieval village, alongside forensic investigations would find that this disturbing practice of mutilating the dead was actually carried out here, in this rather picturesque place, hundreds of years ago. By analysing bones that were excavated and dated to the medieval period from Wharram Percy, it was found that many of the bones had distinct knife marks on them, showing that the bodies had in fact been decapitated and dismembered. Evidence was also found of burning parts of the body and deliberately breaking some of the bones after death. So during the medieval period at Wharram Percy, people would go up and dig up the corpses of the recently deceased, decapitate them and mutilate them to prevent a possible situation involving the dead body rising up and spreading plague and violence across the village. Researchers even considered the possibility that the bones found could have been subject to cannibalism, with the fact that famine was common during the medieval times. It was theorised possibly that the corpses could have been eaten by starving villagers, however the evidence for this theory didn't fit. With cannibalism, knife marks on the bone tend to cluster around major muscle attachments or large joints, but at Wharram Percy, the knife marks were found around the head and the neck area of the skeletal remains, which discounts this theory. So although Wharram Percy is England's best deserted medieval village and possibly most well preserved, it offers a rather dark insight into the beliefs of the peasants and villagers that lived in the area. The fact they would dig up corpses, decapitate them and mutilate bodies, even burning some of the parts to ward off the living dead in the fear that they brought disease and devastation, is incredibly interesting, however seems extremely bizarre. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Once again, thank you for watching.